Welcome back, everybody. My name is Tucker, and with the decade nearly at an end, I wanted to look back at my 10 absolute favorite NBA teams. And these teams have a special place in my mind because of a memorable playoff run, fun or interesting players, an entertaining play style, or some combination of the three. This was a really fun exercise to go back and look back at what has been an incredible decade in the NBA. And I think if you guys did the same, you would find it pretty difficult to pick just 10 teams. But with all that said, let's go ahead and get onto the list, going through my 10 favorite NBA teams of the decade in chronological order. Number 1, the 2010-11 Dallas Mavericks. First up on the list is a team that's here because this is my favorite championship of the entire decade, and there's a couple of different reasons for that. One, people didn't really see this Mavericks team as a championship contender. They'd been written off for a couple of seasons after losing the 2006 finals. They'd been good, but they certainly weren't up to championship level in a lot of people's opinions in the more recent years leading up to this 2010-11 season, and people had pretty much written off the idea that Dirk Nowitzki would ever win a championship. And there were a lot of other teams to focus on, like the Miami Heat, that they of course ended up meeting in the finals. And the second part of this was a roster that worked extremely well together, but just had so many kind of weird and funky pieces. They got Tyson Chandler in a preseason trade with Charlotte for basically nothing. There were other guys like Sean Marion and Brian Cardinal and Deshaun Stevenson and old Jason Kidd involved in this team, and it worked so well, especially once they got in a role in the postseason in combination with a Dirk that was playing extremely well, but it still just wasn't exactly a team you would look at and be like, yeah, they're going to win a championship. And then the last part of it is just that there were so many guys on this team that got their first championship as a result of this run. Of course, there's Dirk, but there's also Jason Kidd, Sean Marion, Jason Terry, other guys on this roster that had not gotten a championship to this point in their careers, finally got one in the 2011 finals with this Mavericks team, and just how unlikely this championship team was and all the pieces that came together in order for it to work made them one of my favorite teams of the decade. Number 2, the 2010-11 Chicago Bulls. Okay, so this one is pretty simple. The reason that I love this team is because it's the Derrick Rose MVP season. This is the year that he broke out and became the youngest MVP in league history. And it wasn't just the historical aspect of it, but Derrick Rose at his peak was so much fun to watch. He had this electric and ultimately reckless playing style that ended up pretty much being the downfall of him because of all the injuries. But when it was going well, when he was at his peak, when he was healthy in this season, they were so much fun to watch. Now, they didn't end up having the postseason success that they had hoped for, losing to the Miami Heat because they were pretty worn out by that point in the season. Tom Thibodeau pretty famously really pushed this team during the season to get them to 62 wins and the first seed in the Eastern Conference. But still, this was such a fun team to watch. Derrick Rose was amazing, and that's why they're one of my favorite teams of the decade. Number 3, the 2011-12 Miami Heat. Next up on the list is another team that's simply related to the championship that they ended up winning, and this is one of my favorite teams of the decade because it was LeBron James's first ring, and I can specifically remember being in like the common room of a dorm because I was at a team camp for basketball with my high school team, and we were watching Game 5, we were watching LeBron finally win his first ring, and it was this overwhelming feeling of this historic event of him finally winning his first championship, and that is just such a memorable thing for me from this past decade. Number 4, the 2012-13 New York Knicks. Okay, so this is the first one that doesn't have anything to do with like a championship or a historic award race like the Derrick Rose Chicago Bulls, and this just has everything to do with this just being a fun team. And believe it or not, even though as much as I talk down about the New York Knicks, I think the league is a lot more fun when they're good, and this was the last time that the Knicks were actually really good. Carmelo was obviously one of the leading scorers in the league. J.R. Smith was the second leading scorer on this team, and they just shot a ton of threes. They were first in the league in attempts as well as makes, and this was a really fun and entertaining Knicks team. Like, you had Anthony, you had J.R. Smith, you had Jason Kidd out there running things. Unfortunately, Amari Stoudemire couldn't stay healthy, but Tyson Chandler was there, and this team was kind of a precursor to a lot of later teams that would overachieve simply because they figured out how to make a ton of three-point shots. And this team was talented, obviously, with Melo and J.R. Smith, but mostly it was just about their shot making, it was about their pace, and this was just a really, really fun Knicks team. And again, the league is just more fun when the Knicks are fun. Number 5, the 2013-14 LA Clippers. This is another one similar to the Knicks thing, where the league, in my opinion, is just more fun when the Clippers are good because it's just never something that you really expect to see, at least historically. But these are the Lob City Clippers, and you could have picked any number of seasons within like a 3-year stretch as your favorite Lob City team. And I just kind of put this year in here as a placeholder for the Lob City era Clippers, and they were just so much fun to watch. Initially, it soured later on, and when they got less athletic and Chris Paul's, just attitude around the whole team just made it kind of not feel nearly as fun as it was at first. But at its peak, with all the lobs to Blake Griffin, DeAndre Jordan, their pace, getting up and down the floor, seeing Chris Paul play and just kind of run everything, this was a really fun team to watch, and unfortunately they never got the postseason success that they had hoped for, but still, this was by far one of my favorite teams of the decade, just strictly from an entertainment standpoint. Number 6, the 2014-15 Golden State Warriors. So when I decided to do this list, this was one of the first teams that came to mind. I didn't have to look into it at all. I knew exactly what this team was all about. And this was the first Steve Kerr year. This was a Warriors team that had won 50 games the year before under Mark Jackson, but the team decided to fire him anyway. They brought in Steve Kerr, and nobody really knew what to expect from these guys. And then they came out, they won 67 games, they won a championship, they proved everybody wrong about a jump shooting team's ability to win a championship, and they launched what has been a dynasty over the last couple of seasons. And this was just such a fun team because nobody really saw it coming. People knew that Klay and Steph were good, but they didn't know that they were going to be this good this quickly, and certainly didn't think they were going to be so historic in terms of their shooting numbers and really completely change the way the game is now played. But it's also about their style of play. These teams, as well as the year after, the 73-win team, were so much fun to watch with their ball movement on and off the ball, obviously the incredible shooting ability, but it wasn't just the same old pick and roll all the time. There was other actions going on the floor, and they were must-watch TV, and I loved watching these teams play, and I wish I could go back in time and just watch these teams play the way they did, because we're being robbed of that now this year because of all the injuries and everything with this team. But this is by far one of my favorite teams of the decade. Number 7, the 2015-16 Oklahoma City Thunder. So some of you probably expected to see a Thunder team on this list, but probably not this one, because there are other ones to pick from where you've got James Harden and KD and Russell Westbrook and Serge Ibaka all on the same Thunder team. But I decided to pick this year because of the historical significance of this team. This is the last KD and Russ team because KD ended up leaving the offseason afterwards. They were up 3-1 on the 73-win Warriors in the conference finals. It looked like they had them on the ropes. They just overwhelmed them with size. And then you have the Warriors fighting back. You have the huge Klay Game 6, and then they end up eliminating the Thunder, and then they get Kevin Durant in the offseason as a result, and it jumpstarts this whole new era for them after all the success of the Steph and Klay era. Now you're adding Kevin Durant to a 73-win team, and this is just such a historically significant Oklahoma City Thunder team because realistically, they had the blueprint in terms of how to beat this team, and they just couldn't quite put them away, and unfortunately, it completely changed the outlook of their franchise. Number 8, the 2015-16 Cleveland Cavaliers. So this team, in terms of an entertainment aspect, was just absolutely through the roof for positive things as well as just, dramatic negative things. They started off the year 30-11 with David Blatt as their head coach, and then they fired him and replaced him with Ty Lue. They made all these crazy midseason moves where they got Timofey Mozgov and Iman Shumpert and J.R. Smith, and then somehow they ended up making it all work. They absolutely destroyed the Eastern Conference in the playoffs. They only lost 2 games on their way to the finals, and then they got down 3-1 in the finals, and it looked like it was just going to be another Warriors championship. And that finals specifically had everything. Like I said, the Warriors are up 3-1, then you've got the Draymond Tech game, so he ends up missing out on game 5, then you've got the Kyrie and LeBron 40 points in the same game, and then you've got game 7 with the LeBron block and the Kyrie shot, and Cleveland breaking the super long championship drought, and LeBron finally winning a championship for Cleveland. And there's just so many historical aspects to this that this team was just such an incredible thing to watch. They were an amazing offensive team. There were so many great moments in that finals run, and it was pretty improbable that they would end up winning a championship that year, considering all the turmoil and drama that they went through during the year. And then also, similar to the last entry, this is a lot of Kevin Durant stuff involved as well, because if they end up losing this finals and the Warriors win it, there's no way Kevin Durant is going to join the 73-win coming off of an NBA championship Warriors, and then he would have stayed potentially with Oklahoma City or gone to Boston. And again, just such a historically significant and entertaining team. Number 9, the 2015-16 Golden State Warriors. Okay, so I won't talk about this one too much because I've talked about them already in the last couple of entries. This is the 73-win Warriors, ended up losing in the finals. You've got the Clay Game 6 and the Oklahoma City series, but still, this was an incredibly fun team to watch. They still had that pre-KD style of just getting the ball up and down the floor, moving the ball. Harrison Barnes was there. They had so much more depth, so it was more of like a team rather than this like super team consolidating all of its power into a couple of big-time star players. So this was just, again, such an entertaining team. I've talked about them enough. I don't need to explain it any further, but they definitely needed to be on this list. Number 10, the 2016-17 Boston Celtics. This was another team that pretty immediately I didn't need to think about too much before putting them on this list, because I loved the pre-Kyrie Boston Celtics teams, most specifically the two Isaiah Thomas years. And this is the year that I always remember as the Isaiah Thomas year, even though he was really good the year before as well. He made second team All-NBA. He had all those heroic performances in the postseason in the face of tragedy. And ultimately, they got to the conference finals. They couldn't make the finals, but then it was just pretty much over in the blink of an eye. They traded away Avery Bradley. They moved Isaiah Thomas to Cleveland in exchange for Kyrie Irving, and then things were just completely different. But just as an individual team, they played so well together. It was awesome to see someone like Isaiah Thomas leading an NBA team as just an absolutely devastating scorer when healthy. And this is going to be, in my opinion, one of the most memorable Celtics seasons as we move forward in their history, because it's just such a significant piece of their history as such a beloved team in the franchise. And there you have it. That is going to be the end of today's video, and I thank you all very much for watching. Once again, my name is Tucker. If you missed any of my previous videos, then be sure to check out the boxes on screen. Thanks again, and I'll see you all next time.